Okay, so let's start today's webinar, I think. We could see that last time we were short in time, so better to start on time. So welcome to everyone to this second webinar of a series that PLATFORMA is holding regularly on EU development cooperation and how local and regional governments contribute to it. PLATFORMA is a coalition of local and regional governments and national, European, global associations active in development cooperation. And the lead partner is the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, CMR, which has signed a framework partnership agreement, a political agreement, with the European Commission in 2015. And other FPA signatories are the association AIMF, Association Internationale des Maires Francophones, CLGF, Commonwealth Local Governments Forum, UCLG, United City Local Governments, and UCLG Africa. So the rules of the game for today, for this online meeting. So when you speak, please use the video. It will ease the interpreter's work. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking to avoid the background noise. Click on the button, raise my hand on the bottom of the screen when you want to speak. You can ask short questions via the chat as well. And colleagues of the Secretariat are connecting and taking notes, so don't hesitate to use that. And interpretation is provided in French and English. So you just have to select the channel on the bottom right of your screen. So we have decided to host this second webinar on how does an EU delegation work, an insight from the inside, with the overall aim for local and regional governments, representative associations of local governments in partner countries, and EU local and regional governments who have developed cooperation with peers in partner countries to get involved in a policy dialogue with the EU at country level. We believe that this must go through a better mutual understanding, and this is why we are here all together today. I hope today's seminar will shed light on the need and obligation actually now for EU delegation to consult local and regional governments and their association during the programming process to discuss and shape policy priorities beyond the mere financial means and work hand in hand for the implementation. We also intend at creating a momentum to ensure better dialogue both in Brussels and in partner countries with the EU to maximize EU impact on the ground and better fit local needs and realities. We are convinced that if the Union wants to realize its ambitions, both at home and abroad, it should engage much more at that local level. As state actor with a general and democratic mandate to promote the welfare of their population, subnational authorities are the natural allies of the EU. Last week, on the webinar on COVID-19 was the right illustration of this. It also means that we are convinced that the EU should empower them to effectively play their role in the 2030 transformative agenda. Effective action requires co-design, co-production, and building synergies between all spheres of government to ensure coherence and impact in our municipalities and regions, taking into account the local governance. So likewise, the potential role of associations of local and regional governments, which was explicitly recognized in the 2013 communication of the EU in terms of capacity building, advocacy, or strategic interlocutor of the EU, is and remain underutilized. So we will be ready to contribute to the programming of the geographic programs with DEVCO and the EU delegations. Local and regional governments and their association want to be partner of the EU development policy, both as policymakers and as implementing actors. So I will now stop here and let my expert colleague Amandine chair the webinar and lead you through this journey into EU delegations and programming at the country level. So Amandine, the floor is yours. Thank you very much and have a nice meeting.
Thank you, Marlene. Good morning, everyone. It's not easy to, it seems really challenging to talk about the EU mechanisms without losing our audience rapidly. So we have a big challenge for this morning. Just a few words about the context on the side of the European Union that entered a new cycle recently with a new parliament from last year with 60% of new members, a new commission college, renewed priorities on the side of the Council, and updated facilities and instruments. That's also in this more technical context that we wanted to organize this seminar, because for its external action, we face a crucial moment. The financial mechanisms are about to change. The future financial instrument, the Neighborhood Development International Cooperation Instrument, is still under negotiations between the three institutions, the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council. The new instrument should enter into force for the new programming phase. That means as of 2021, for 7 years. At the same time, the pre-programming phase has already started in Brussels, and the programming phase also at EU Delegation. And that's all these concepts that we want to tackle and to address today with our key experts from the European institutions. So without further introduction, I would like to introduce you to our four speakers from the DEVCO and DEVCO of the European Commission and the European External Action Service. We'll have Lixi and Agathe Plauchut from the European Commission, Peter Frisch and Karim Asaki from the European External Action Service, and our colleague Gabino Gutierrez, young expert working with us at PLATFORMA. I will first give the floor to Lixi, who will build on her long experience in EU delegations to explain to us what actually an EU delegation is and how it works. So Anna, you have 10 minutes to explain everything about the EU delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Amandine. I have 10 minutes, a little bit, because I will have to check the timing. So 9:08. I would like to connect to what Marlène and Amandine said, why it is important in this particular moment to talk about the delegations and the programming. Because, as Amandine highlighted, there is a new multi-annual financial framework which will start from 2021 to 2027. And in this new multi-annual financial framework, that, as Amandine said, the three institutions, Commission, Parliament and Council are discussing, there is a major change in the programming for the local authorities, the Association of Local Authorities. And the major change is basically that for the moment, as the Commission has presented and submitted its position, the famous budget line, which was for civil society and local authorities, which allowed us, through the thematic program, to launch call for proposals and to finance local authorities, has been withdrawn. There is no more budget line for the thematic program. What does it mean? That the support to the local authorities should come through the programming phase, which means the programming of the country support that EEAS and the Commission will set for each and every single country. As Marlène highlighted, where this process takes place in the Commission in Brussels, in the headquarters, but mostly in the delegations. And so I will just give a very few description of how a delegation works, because then there will be, as Amandine said, Agathe, and then two colleagues from EEAS, which will explain more the programming. But I wanted to create these links because it is important to understand why we are providing some description on the work of the delegations. I've been working in 3 delegations, in Venezuela, in Egypt, and Bangladesh. And Venezuela experience is different from Bangladesh and the Egypt experience. And why? Because before I was in Venezuela, I was working in the delegation of the European Commission. While in Bangladesh and Egypt, I work in the delegation of the European Union after the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty has put in place a new institution, as you know. The new institution is the European External Action Service. and the delegation of the Commission towards third countries moved from being delegation of the Commission to delegation of the European Union. This is a major change for our work in particular, for the work of the people like me working on development cooperation. Why? Because before in the delegation of the European Commission, you would have found people working on development cooperation. So simply implementing development projects. In the delegation of the European Union, you have a completely different setup. In the delegation of the European Union, first of all, you have, as an head of delegation, you can have both officials coming from the European External Action Service or from DEVCO, meaning people who have been used and who are used to work on development issues. But you can also have, second category, you can also have diplomats of the member states who joined the European External Action Service and go to serve as head of delegations in partner countries. You can notice, my colleagues, if they had experience in working in the delegations, they can share with you most probably the same experience. If you serve in a delegation in which the head of delegation comes from the development side, from the Commission, you normally have an head of delegation very implicated in development cooperation matters. In most cases, if you are serving in a delegation in which the head of delegation is a diplomat of EU member states, this approach towards the development issues, that was the typical approach of the delegations until the Lisbon Treaty, is different because they are diplomats. They obviously now represent the European Union, but they are first of all, they are diplomats, and so their approach and the work that they set up is more around this, let's say, diplomatic and flavor. So this is one important differentiation that we have to highlight. Another important differentiation, which is probably the basis, is that now, since the delegations are delegation of the European Union, inside the delegation, we do not have anymore only a team of people working on development cooperation issues, but like any other embassy, you will have a department for political affairs, a department for trade, depending on the kind of relationship developed with each and every single country. You will start having experts on labor law, on migration, so colleagues coming from DG Home. You may have colleagues coming from DG Trade, from DG Santé, so you can start having different kind of experts who work in a different field under the leadership of the head of delegation. So you have to imagine nowadays a European Union delegation more as an embassy, meaning that inside this embassy there are many different sectors, many different areas of intervention. The one that interests us the most, and when I say us, I say us in the Commission, DG DEVCO, and you, local authorities, is the sector dealing with development cooperation. To be highlighted that this sector, the sector on development cooperation, in many delegations has been basically either reduced or disappeared. In many delegations in Latin American countries, for example, they have the delegation in Argentina, we have the delegation in Argentina, the delegation in Uruguay, for example, but there is no more in those delegations a real department on development cooperation. You have different departments. We have the political departments, you have the trade department, because those have become the most important areas to follow in those countries in which there has been a process towards the approximation to the previous Millennium Development Goals, and the Development Cooperation Department in those countries, for example, has been, let's say, regrouped in the so-called regional cooperation, like having a regional responsibility for development issues, which is the one, for example, in Brazil. In Brazil, you have a department dealing with development cooperation covering different countries in Latin America. Another important point to highlight is that the size of the delegation is very different. You can have a delegation of 20, 25 people. Let's talk about Angola. It's a small delegation. And you can have a big delegation like the one in which I served in Egypt, is one of the biggest, together with the one in Russia, together with the one in China. Bangladesh is, I would say, a big delegation because the programming also phase, the programming for the development cooperation is pretty big. So the development department inside the Bangladesh delegation is big. But you may have many different kinds of size in the delegation, and this obviously influence a lot the capacity of work that our colleagues have. Also because due to the fact that the member states are not very pro-Europe, the tendency is to reduce the costs, and this tendency to reduce the cost have been translated in the reduction of the number of colleagues who can go and serve in the delegations in the development field. And so you normally find there people very much under pressure, understaffed. I can share with you an experience. My experience both in Egypt and Bangladesh, we were working until from 8:39 in the morning until between 8 and 9 in the evening, and we were working Saturday and Sunday. So this, I share with you this experience because if you as local authority associations contact colleagues in the delegation, in most of the cases, please be aware that they are very much under pressure and working a lot. If they do not reply, it's not for lack of attention, is in most of the cases because the priorities and the pressures are very, very strong. I have to leave here, or I have 1 minute more?
That's perfect, Anna. That's really, really, unless you wanted to conclude.
No, okay. I will probably intervene after my colleagues will speak about the programming, because there I would like to make the connection between approaching a delegation on the programming exercise, as we said, for the geographic program, for the bilateral program, because in principle there is no more thematic program to support the local authorities.
Great, that's a great idea. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing with us your experience in the EU delegation. That makes us and that lets us understand really better how the division of labor is organized within a delegation. And we will be happy to discuss further with you how to engage concretely with them on the programming. Now we will enter another part of the discussion and talk about the programming itself. So Platforma welcomes, Platforma partners welcome really that the EU development policy is increasingly promoting policy dialogue and partnerships, which leads to include a broader range of stakeholders like local and regional governments and their associations from Europe or partner countries. I will now give the floor to a trio from a team from DEVCO and the European External Action Service, who will have the delicate mission to tell us everything about the programming itself. So what do we call programming? How do the EU institutions headquarters in Brussels and the EU delegations in partner countries work together on the programming? Is there a space for the local and regional governments? All of that in 20 minutes. That's also a good challenge. So 3 persons in 20 minutes. I think Peter Frisch arrived. Yeah, thank you. So we will have, as planned, Peter Frisch first, who will give the general political frame in which the action of local and regional governments have to be led, have to be led, which is the Agenda 2030. And then we'll have Agathe Plauchut from DEVCO, from the unit dealing with the coordination and programming of the external financing instruments, who will talk about the current calendar, the more technical details about the programming, and Karima Saki will close this team's participation intervention. Karima Saki is also from European External Action Service, also from the Development Cooperation Coordination Division, and she will explain the pre-programming and programming phases from a strategical and political point of view. So please, Peter, if you hear me, the floor is yours. I hope you hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Good morning. Sorry to be late, but voila. At least I'm just in time.
Yeah, exactly. Most important is that you're here. Thank you.
Have the colleagues got the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I'm dealing with it, and I will share it with everyone right now.
So the idea is to give you a bit an idea on how, how programming, how you can step into the programming process. And I think the idea is to show that the Agenda 2030 is really the game changer. And leads to localization of SDGs and leaves a lot of space for local authorities. That's my personal feeling, and that has also been discussed at the policy framework, Policy Forum for Development in Kathmandu last year. It was one of the subjects. So if you see the first slide, this is an attempt to present ourselves and for you to get to know us. And you see that there are different things that trigger the ways we work, the historical ties, the core foreign, no, we stay with the first one, yeah, thank you. The core foreign objectives, trade, commercial interests, fundamental values, and living up to global commitments like SDGs, the Paris Agreement, European Green Deal, effective multilateralism. Of course, that is something that is key to our work. You can of course, present things differently, but I think this shows how different things will guide our work. You will have, of course, DG Trade, for example, giving a lot of attention to trade, but we will come in and try to have an equilibrium and say there are human rights and fundamental values as well, and so the trade agreements have those clauses. That would be our work, for example. So different parts of the EU institutions have more interested in some domains, but our work is really to englobe the whole framework. Then we come to the next slide, and this shows how things have evolved since the creation of the EEAS in December 2010. And again, this is just a way to present things. That's how I see things, based also on my contacts with ECDPM, but further developed by me. So there are geopolitics playing a role. There are different models, socioeconomic models today. We have the COVID-19 pandemics, which leads us to question certain things. We have to live with fake news called alternative facts by Donald Trump, for example. We have this multilateralism under strain, under pressure, and there's an international cooperation beyond poverty alleviation. I will come to that. And Europe is promoting its interest along with its values. That's a bit the one key thing to know. The other thing is that domestic drivers get very strong because there's a nexus between internal and external policies. And as you have seen, there's a need for a more coherent approach when it comes to COVID, for example, but also for other questions like migration. But we see that bilateralism is getting stronger and stronger. Now, the next slide is a bit to show you the different policy documents, and you will see at the center with the flash the Agenda 2030, because we think that it is a game changer. It is a central document because it applies to everybody. You have other documents that are key to our work, like the global strategy on the left side. You have the new consensus for development, but everything is going towards 2030, in fact. And I'm not going to develop on the regional strategies, because if we talk about partnership and ownership, it is important that those are agreed with our partners, and that's not always the case. Next slide shows you that the global goals of Agenda 2030 is universal, is pushing for multilateralism, and it is applying to all of us, so also to industrial countries, and that's why we stick to that. It's really a central document. Of course, it is very complex to handle with 230 indicators, but it is really the central document compared to others. We go to the next slide. The global strategy, which you need to know that this was something in 2016 when Europe was under threat. You remember the terrorist attack in Paris in January, November 2015 in Brussels. So there's a lot of tension within Europe, but this document is really responding to those challenges at this time. And if we go a bit further, we see that today we should change the word terrorism by the word COVID, for example. This wordle means words that come often in a document, and here we talk about the global strategy, are shown in big letters like security. But you'll see that I have made some red circles around words that matter very much in Agenda 2030. And you see that they are very small. So there's not so much an adequacy of global strategy and Agenda 2030. Don't quote me on that, because I will be sacked. No, I'm joking. But I should defend the global strategy, but it's a bit out of date, to be frank. Then we have the consensus for development. It went from poverty to something which is now broader and which is beyond poverty and aligning on 2030 agenda. You see here on top the wordle with 2005 consensus, the old one where poverty was key, and then you have the new one which is more geared towards Agenda 2030. So The next slide is just to give you the figures. My colleagues will develop on that, but you see that there is an increase in resources, which is foreseen, and that there's stronger emphasis on climate change, stability, migration, security, and finally interests and values. The next slide is, we have the slide before, please, was about, you will see, we just go back, Amandine, if you don't, no, there's this one, yes. You see in orange what is important. We have the geographic pillar now in the new DICI. On DC, will certainly find a better name for that instrument. The geographical pillar is the largest, and there's a ring fencing about subjects that are important to you, like climate change, social inclusion, environmental protection, gender equality. So those things play a big role. And that's why I think, and that you'll see in the next slide, that we can talk about localizing the SDGs. That means that the Agenda 2030 is certainly something which makes sense in local policy and action from the bottom up. And you see that the key cornerstone is SDG 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. This is really your entry point, but there's also the lining up with the urban dimension of all other goals, including SDG 16, which is peace and justice and strong institutions. So that is essential as well. You see here the graph, the quality is very bad, I'm sorry, of the quality of the next slide. But you see that local authorities have a role to play in 110 of the 169 targets. So it's really 65%. And this is really your entry point. And so why localizing SDGs? Why does it matter? And that's the next slide. The SDGs are global, of course.
Peter, we will soon have to give the floor to Agathe so that we can understand. Just to let you know.
The last slide.
Cool.
It's the last slide. The SDGs are global, but the reality is on the field, on local governments, and which are the front desks. So all this leads us to say that local actors are key and need to be consulted, and the guidelines for programming are under preparation, and there will certainly be an inclusion of local authorities in the programming process. And this is the end for me, but Adele will use one of those slides that come afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you for ending your presentation with just such a suspense. Like there will be the local and authorities included. That's this will be important indeed for us. Agathe, are you ready? Do I put the
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. And can you see me? I'm not sure. Well, we
yes,
don't care. We have the slide.
No,
okay.
And you have
very
5
good.
minutes, if that's okay.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm Agathe Plauchut. I work in DEVCO in the unit in charge of the MFF and the programming process. And Anna and Amandine and Marlene, I think as well, referred to the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. And so this is the instrument the Commission proposed for covering our cooperation with partner countries in the next budget period. So that would be 2021 to 2027. And it's a pretty big change because it would encompass what is currently 11 instruments. So it's quite a big change, and it would bring more coherence, but we would also have to work a lot to ensure that coherence and that everything works well. So just to present briefly the instrument, we would have 3 pillars, and the main one, as Peter said, is the geographic one. And what you know as the CSO LA line in the current MFF, to which Anna referred, was previously under the DCI thematic. And so it wouldn't be covered under the thematic pillar, but under the geographic pillar mainly, through a geographic approach. So that would mean that both, as Anna said, this would be programmed at country level. So this webinar is very, very useful, I think, for you to really understand the new role of the delegations, the fact that they would have a major role in the future in programming and designing actions related to local authorities, to their role, and to like helping them in the implementation of the SDGs on the ground. So indeed, EU delegations already play a major role in relation with local authorities, but it will be even more true in the future if what the Commission proposed is adopted. So just to refer to the negotiation process, we are currently negotiating the instrument with the European Parliament and the Council. Both positions are public, so I can refer to them. The Council supports the geographization approach for local authorities. So they agree with the Commission on the fact that to have maximum impact in supporting local authorities in their role as development actors, we should do that on the ground, so geographically. But the European Parliament has more doubts. It considers that what the CSO LA line did was useful, and that maybe it wouldn't be done properly geographically. So they would prefer to maintain a thematic line for local authorities as well. So the negotiation is not over yet. It's ongoing, and we'll see where it leads us. Hopefully, we will have an instrument adopted by the end of this year, and then we can start its implementation beginning of next year. And so the programming will go in parallel to this negotiation. And I think Karima will detail the programming process, but I think what's really important for you is to understand that the programming for each country will be designed mainly on the ground. So your relations with EU delegations and the views you have to express, I think, have to be shared on the ground, not only in Brussels through PLATFORMA, who does a great job. So indeed, I think it's absolutely of major importance to understand that programming will frame our cooperation with partner countries for the next 7 years. We can change programming indeed, but it's very important to be engaged from the beginning and to really make sure that what's important for local authorities and what's important for their actions on the ground is included in the programming, and yeah, so that it can be translated into actions. Yeah, maybe I can pass the floor to Karima, because I don't want to like say what she intended to say on the programming process, and if needed, I can complement, of course.
Thank you, Agathe. Karima, you want to take the floor? Karima, is Karima here? Karima, do you hear us? Karima. Yes, Karima.
Do you see Karima or not?
I think, yeah, I think she's she entered the room. Up. I cannot see. Anna, you wanted to complement quickly? Yeah, I unmute you then. Oops, no, I cannot.
After that, I can also do the agenda of the programming phase if
Yes,
Karima is not
can you,
there.
Amandine?
Yeah, just 1 minute. Yeah, Anna. Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead, Anna, for 1 minute.
No,
yeah,
if you can go to this last slide of Agathe.
Yeah, I will try. Yes, this one.
Yeah, so I would like to add one important element. You see there the thematic and the geographic, because sometimes we use geographization. What does it mean, geographization, that Agathe expressed? Means that if you go to the thematic, you have a civil society organization. There was in the past civil society organization and local authorities. What is the main difference between the thematic and the geographic? The thematic, and this is the reason why you find those areas, is not by coincidence, the thematic are defined without the need of agreeing with the partner countries. So if you have, let's take the first one in the thematic, human rights and democracy, is a thematic program. What does it mean? That there are funds to support human rights and democracy, and you do not need to agree on those with the partner countries.
Yeah. Maybe we can.
If you move to the geographic, the geographic have to be always agreed with the partner countries. And when you have the countries very, very centralized, for example, or not in favor of the local authorities, is where you have to work more in order to get the local authorities on board. Sorry for this, because it's an important differentiation.
It is important
to be made, because the thematic are set by us, the geographic are set with the governments.
Yeah, and don't be sorry to mention that, because that was one of the thing I wanted to highlight as well, is that the thematic line, that's also why the thematic line is super important to us. It's that it allows to work with local authorities, even though the central government is not in favor, to facilitate this a decentralized approach. So that's very, very important, and thank you for this.
We cannot go now on the concept, the philosophical concepts of why we call them thematic and why the Commission in the past historical has set up the thematic programs, because it's too complicated. But it is clear, for example, if you look at human rights and democracy, this allows us to work in countries where the human rights are not taken at all into account, for example.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot. Maybe Agathe, you can go on then and take the floor. Take the floor to again. Thank you.
Oh no. Can you hear me? Good. Yeah, so I will briefly present where we stand in the programming process. In the past months, we have conducted what we call the pre-programming phase. So it was an exploratory phase where we looked at what we would like to do in partner countries, what are the priority areas we could identify. And pretty soon we will launch the programming process per se. We should be a bit more advanced now, but because of the COVID situation and the fact that we work remotely, that many things have changed, we didn't launch the programming process, so we are a bit late, but it will come pretty soon. And what's important, I think, to watch will be the preparation of the programming guidelines, where we will say to EU delegations how they have to work with both local actors, but also European actors, who they have to consult, etc. So these guidelines are pretty important, and I think in that regard, Platforma represents you very well. And then on the ground, you have a role to play in explaining EU delegations why decentralized cooperation can be important, why working with LAs can be, and we will make sure that on the ground they also consult local authorities. partner local authorities, of course. Regarding calendar, I have to remain very vague. Honestly, I don't know when we will issue the guidelines. It's not langue de bois, we are just late. So I think it will be for this summer. Yeah, and yeah, we will start working on this very soon. And also I wanted to highlight that during the preparatory phase, EU delegations have consulted locally, local actors, pretty much everyone. They did a really, really great job in consulting. So we are sure that they will do that as well for the programming process, even more so. Yeah, and local authorities will be consulted through different channels. In Brussels, we don't really know when for now, because we wanted to use the Policy Forum for Development, of course. It would have been a good opportunity to exchange, but now we are reflecting on the best ways forward. And yeah, we will come back on that as soon as possible, as soon as the situation is back to normal. Yeah, if you have questions, I will be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Agathe, Peter, and Anna for these explanations about the programming. This is very useful for us and for the partners to understand really concretely that we have to be active at local, at country level, and not only in Brussels. So thank you very much. Without further ado, I will give the floor to Gabino Gutierrez, who is our colleague, a young expert working in Platforma, at Platforma, on a study, on a qualitative study on the work between the EU delegations and local and regional governments. So Gabino, if you want to take the floor, you have 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. Thank you.
Can you share the...
Absolutely, I will share your presentation then.
Good morning. I'm Gabino Gutierrez. I'm conducting the study in collaboration with the CFAB unit of the DEVCO. Do you hear me? Good. Okay. I would like to briefly mention the advantages of the local and regional governments work with the EU delegations, which you can put the first slide, please. The first and obvious reason is that the local and regional governments are the key public service delivers and covers the basic needs of the population. That comes to the closer actions to the citizens they do. That means easier ownership and participation of the population and better engagement with the local players such as local CSO, local private sector, local leaders, or academia on the field. The work with the local and regional governments is also a useful tool to reduce the geographical gaps, especially in big countries where there could be a concentration of poverty or areas without public services to cover the mentioned needs, such as health, transport, waste management, water and sanitation, and important to enhance the governance capacities of the local governments on the field to allow further development policies by themselves and more democratic participatory policies. The next slide. The EU delegations consulted have mentioned a few obstacles in the work with the local and regional governments. The first of them is obviously the grade of decentralization in each country, because the autonomy and the independence of the local and regional governments in those countries is the power that allow them to engage with other actors that in a centralized countries, like Anna had said, maybe are considered by the central governments are foreign interventors that are not reliable. So that's the biggest problem there. Also, the EU delegations face the weak management capacities in countries with extreme territorial fragmentation, on either other side, huge territories with a lack of resources and management capacities. That could be at decentralized countries that have local regional governments empowered only in the paper, but then a lack of political will to give them financial tools or human resources to have that development policy implemented. So the EU delegations face skills and human resource problems in their engagement with them. Next slide. So to overcome the obstacles, the European Commission are developing that roadmaps, country roadmaps that structure the dialogue and the local regional governments. Sorry, to have a joint vision in each country's local governance structures, legal framework, so they can have a common and joint vision to guide the decentralized cooperation. Then there are some pilot cases in Mali, Colombia, Ecuador, and Chad, and the EU delegations consulted. Most of them have highlight the fact that the roadmap has to take into account the players on the field, the national local governments association, the local CSOs, and the EU delegations themselves. But the EU delegations work with the local regional governments from Europe have many advantages, but I really want to highlight the next. There are many for the EU delegations and for the local regional governments. I would like to go deeper in some of them, like the political closeness that the local regional governments could have in the partner countries, because our peer-to-peer relationships are more stable, are more close, that as Anna has said, that a big EU diplomat with a mayor in the partner countries. The EU delegations can, of course, use the development, education, and awareness raising that the local governments are used to implement in their countries to enhance the consciousness of the development policies and the support of to the development policies. Also, the EU delegations, most of them are not in stable relationships and dialogue with the local government association in partner countries. I think that it's a good job to do by our local regional governments that have more relationship with them in a peer-to-peer relation. I think Agathe have mentioned that the EU delegations are consulting the local actors, but most EU delegations have not a real dialogue with that local government associations. So that should be a good starting point, because their goal in the partner countries is to develop the training of that local governments and the development policies there, and the public service delivery. And the resources of the local regional governments, I would like to show you that most of the projects mentioned by the EU delegations, when we asked them about the projects and programs related to local regional governments, are with the CSO LA line. Because as Anna has said, that line doesn't need the agreement with the central governments, that one. As we can see, as the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights and the CSO thematic line are more flexible and more and faster to implement programs, because they avoid the central bureaucracy and the central political interest that could be in centralized countries. So we advocate for that roadmaps, the CSO thematic line, and a better engagement of the EU delegations with the local and regional government associations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabino. That was a brilliant presentation. The results of your study will be published in a publication that will be released very soon, we hope. And every participant, all the participants, of course, will be able to access it. Thank you very much again. Now we enter to the last part of our discussion, and we will focus on how do local and regional governments and their associations engage with the European Union in the field. That is there was an inspiring question for our members, sorry, apps. Yeah. And I will give the floor right now to Rolf Swart if he has a few minutes. I know he was supposed to leave at 10, so I'm very, very sorry we are a bit late. Rolf, are you here? Can you take the floor right now? Yeah, hi, hello. Please, the floor is yours. Rolf Swart, sorry, works with VNG International, the development agency of municipalities of the Netherlands. We cannot hear you, Rolf. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Or maybe I'm the only one not to hear you, but no. You're mute, you're not mute, but is your microphone? I'm sorry. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Did you connect?
Maybe you can't, don't use your headphones, maybe. Yeah.
Ah. So.
In the ordinary way, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, sure. Thank you, Rolf. Please.
Okay, okay, well, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you all the previous speakers. I think it was very interesting to hear, and very much on a strategic level, and my intervention is far more on the local and the implementation level. I have 4 different points that I would like to bring across. First of all, our experiences working with the EUDs. Second point is the involvement in programming. And the third point is some of our concerns on the role of local governments in the new instruments. And a few remarks finally on the centralized sustainable partnerships. Maybe to start with our experiences with the EUDs, I think generally speaking, these are quite positive. We have currently contracts going on with Addis Ababa, Beirut, Pretoria, Harare, Yangon, Ramallah, Tunis, and Nairobi, basically from the thematic budget line. And our relationships are, I should say, in most of the cases, very cordial and very good. And that is portrayed also by the flexibility towards the contingency planning that we're now all engaged in terms of the COVID-19 threats, and we have to change our programs. And I must say the EU delegations are very cooperative and very flexible in accommodating, let's say, the new ways that we need to work because of the pandemic. So that's very good. And I think what I do observe is there's a big difference between the technical staff, the development cooperation, let's say, minded staff, and maybe sometimes the finance departments, which tends to be very bureaucratic. So sometimes you have an agreement with your technical staff, but then you face obstacles that the financial people are, putting all sorts of conditions and basically delaying processes. And that's one of the experiences that we have. But overall, I would say we have a very good relationship. I would wanted to comment a little bit on our Myanmar program, but in terms of the time, maybe I can skip that for now. But for people who are interested, go to the Facebook page VNG Magic, and you will see a lot of, let's say, interactions, pictures of our work that we're doing in Myanmar with one of the thematic program contracts. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point is the involvement in programming. So far, we have not been really consulted and invited by the EU delegations to think along in the new programming cycle. I think the last interaction I had with a month ago with the delegation in Addis, just before we were all forced to go back, maybe 5 weeks ago already. I was on one of the last flights from Addis Ababa, and there they basically said we're still waiting for instructions from Brussels, and we ourselves, we don't know exactly how the programming will look like, so you have to wait before we can consult the partners. So for me, it's really important that also the delegations, they invite us, especially in the countries I mentioned where we are present. I think we have something to contribute, and yeah, we are very keen to better know how EU delegations will organize this consultation process. Maybe the third point, and I think it has already been expressed by some of the previous speakers, we share, I think with PLATFORMA very much our fear that the shift from the thematic to the geographic instruments, as was explained, will take some of the beauty that the current programming has away. I think one thing was mentioned, the thematic program can be done without, let's say, the full government agreement. It's flexible, and also the threshold is very low. And what I think, and I refer to Peter's presentation, he said, well, the budgets are increasing, the number of staff in the EU delegations is already constrained, but we don't see that it will increase a lot. So basically, the smaller programs, the 2 or 3 million programs, are not very interested for the EU delegations. They simply like the larger programs that they can sign delegated cooperation agreements for large amounts of money. And our fear is that one of the beauties of the thematic instrument, notably that you can have small interventions, easy, flexible, that these will disappear. So that's one of the, and I think it's also confirmed by the study, the person before me who was presenting the study, that if indeed it is true that 54% of all local government related interventions are going through the thematic program, then it's really a fear from our side that under the new geographic program that will be lost. But anyway, I'm not against, let's say, new instruments. We have to find our way, and we probably have to do our lobby work to make sure that local governments find their way. But it is definitely a concern also for our association. Maybe the last point that I would like to make, it's a bit out of line, but this new sustainable partnership program, we really feel it's a pity that the eligibility criteria do not allow local government associations to participate as full-fledged partner. And to give you an example, we were very far with the city of Eindhoven in the Netherlands and the city of Kigali in Rwanda in preparing a partnership. We had the head of delegation in Kigali who was really very favorable. The Dutch ambassador was very favorable. But simply because cities in the Netherlands and Eindhoven in this particular case, they do not have sufficient staff to manage all the, let's say, the administrative side, they really lean upon organizations like ours, the association, to support them in implementing those programs. And the fact that now we are not eligible for this program has indeed, has led to the decision of the city of Eindhoven finally not to pursue this opportunity. And we had a similar case with Hebron in Palestine territories. It's simply very much a pity that this instrument also did not give us the opportunity to apply for it. But generally speaking, I think we see a lot of possibilities and we're looking really forward to take an active role in debating and the programming with the new NDICI. I very much agree we need a new name for that. I mean, one of the beauties of our Myanmar program is the name MAGIC, which is Myanmar Accountable Government and Inclusive Communities Magic. That's a beautiful name. We should find something for the new instrument as well. So thank you. I'm sorry I cannot stay because I have this other meeting at 10 o'clock that has already started, but I'm happy to have been able to make my points. So thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Ralph, for making your point. It was essential to have your contribution. So thank you for being late to your next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So I didn't have the time to really explain. We have, let's say, 15 minutes to talk all together, to have some questions and answers. I will give the floor now to Laurent Jabeuf from the Association Internationale des Maires Francophones. I will repeat again that there is translation between French and English, so feel free to speak in French as well.
Merci Amandine, je parlerai en français parce que comme ça ce sera plus facile de m'exprimer et mieux qu'en mauvais anglais. Merci. Je voulais dire sur le travail avec les délégations, je ne vais pas insister parce qu'en fait on travaille très bien avec les délégations. Je veux dire que dans tous les pays où il y a une délégation qui travaille sur des programmes avec les autorités locales, voilà, tout se passe très bien. On a travaillé au Tchad, au Gabon, au Burkina Faso, au Bénin, à Djibouti, en Côte d'Ivoire, au Cambodge, en Tunisie. Dans tous ces pays, les relations et le travail de la délégation se passent très bien. Ils sont tous en contact avec les associations nationales. Et donc, la question de leur implication dans la programmation, c'est peut-être des questions de procédure, mais sur le fond, il ne me semble pas qu'il y a de difficultés majeures. Ce qui me semble être le plus important, en fait, c'est ce qu'a dit Anna tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire que sur les programmes géographiques, ce ne sont pas seulement les délégations qui décident, mais les gouvernements nationaux. Donc, vous pouvez avoir une délégation qui va faire un excellent travail, mais à partir du moment où le gouvernement national doit choisir quelques priorités sur lesquelles concentrer sa coopération avec l'Union européenne, c'est de plus en plus difficile aujourd'hui de retenir les autorités locales. Pourquoi ? Parce que dans le monde aujourd'hui, avec le renforcement de l'urbanisation, avec l'élection des maires au suffrage universel, vous vous retrouvez dans les villes avec tous les opposants politiques des partis au pouvoir. Donc, vous imaginez déjà qu'à l'époque, un gouvernement va choisir des priorités qui l'intéressent plus, l'agriculture, enfin, tout un tas de programmes. Mais maintenant que vous avez dans les villes ces opposants politiques, vous pouvez être sûr qu'ils vont, dans 95% des cas, refuser de faire de cette priorité sur l'urbanisation une des priorités de leur coopération avec l'Union européenne. Donc, quelle est la conséquence de tout ça ? Tout le monde s'accorde aujourd'hui autour de cette table, j'allais dire, mais dans cette visioconférence, sur le fait que l'urbanisation est une priorité, l'agenda 2030, les ODD, les programmes de l'Union européenne, etc., tous en font une grande priorité. Mais en fait, aujourd'hui, on a le risque, sans instrument thématique, qu'il y ait tout simplement 0 programme dans 6 ans ou 7 ans sur les autorités locales, puisque les gouvernements nationaux sont ceux qui vont devoir décider. Donc, la question qui se pose, ça va être de savoir quelles garanties, comment s'assurer que les autorités locales vont pouvoir bénéficier de programmes dans ces instruments géographiques. En effet, on sait que les délégats, donc 75% désormais des financements du NDK vont devoir être gérés par les délégations au lieu de 50% aujourd'hui. Qu'est-ce que ça signifie ? Ça veut dire que la charge de travail sur les autorités locales, sur les délégations, pardon, va être encore plus grande, alors que leurs ressources humaines sont toujours limitées et légalement ne peuvent pas être augmentées. Donc, vous avez d'un côté des gouvernements qui ne vont pas être favorables à traiter les autorités locales, des délégations surchargées, et sans instrument thématique, il n'y a plus déjà aujourd'hui de focal points pour les autorités locales. Donc, il n'y a plus véritablement d'interlocuteurs, si ce n'est ceux qu'il y avait déjà auparavant, avec qui nous pouvons dialoguer. Donc, ce que je voulais peut-être dire, c'est que sur le travail avec les délégations, sincèrement, je veux dire, il n'y a pas d'inquiétude majeure en soi du point de vue des délégations, si ce n'est le manque de ressources humaines de leur côté. Mais c'est sur le principe, si on s'accorde à dire que l'urbanisation est un des grands enjeux des 10-15 prochaines années, alors nous avons tout faux dans la programmation, puisque nous n'avons aucune garantie qu'il y ait le moindre programme aujourd'hui sur ce sujet-là, ou en tout cas il y en aura très peu. Donc c'était un peu ce cri d'alerte que je voulais lancer aujourd'hui, parce qu'on peut rentrer dans les détails de comment associer, etc., mais sur le fond, ce n'est pas ça le problème. Donc, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, il y a encore une fenêtre d'opportunité parce que le Parlement, et il a raison, à mon sens, tient bon sur cette ligne thématique. Et je pense que c'est un enjeu. Et cette ligne est complémentaire au programme géographique. Souvent, dans les 8 dernières années, puisqu'il y avait déjà, en fait, la géographisation n'est pas nouvelle, elle existe depuis 2008, ça existait déjà. C'est là où il y a eu des programmes thématiques, qu'il y a eu de bons programmes géographiques. Ces deux lignes sont absolument complémentaires. Donc, à notre sens, c'est vraiment un enjeu de la maintenir. Voilà, je ne veux pas être plus long et je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup Laurent, c'était très clair. On a bien saisi cette idée de complémentarité entre les lignes géographiques et thématiques. Merci beaucoup à toi. I think we have Ronald, if Ronald is here, from the Association of Dutch Municipalities Partnering with Nicaragua. I don't know what's happening. Ronald is sharing his screen. Ronald?
Hello?
Yeah, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. So you have 2-3 minutes to share with us your views on the work with the delegation.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Can you hear us? That's a good question. Do you hear us? Yes, Ronald. Okay. If we will solve the... Can you hear us now?
Hello?
Yes. Oh, maybe we'll leave Ronald solve the connection issues and
Hello?
We will give the floor to Anna then in between. Oh, Ronald,
okay,
do you hear
then
us?
I will start.
Good.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the former speakers, very interesting. I was asked by the Secretariat to present briefly the case of Nicaragua. We are an association of Dutch municipalities who are already more than 30 years involved in city linking with partner towns in Nicaragua. Nicaragua maybe is a special case. You know, there is a political crisis there since April 2018. We are member of PLATFORMA since 2017. And after the crisis, under the umbrella of PLATFORMA, we organized ourselves in Europe. In 2019, there was a meeting in our office in Amsterdam with representatives of local authorities and association of local authorities present in Nicaragua, from Spain, from France, from Germany, from Belgium, Italy, all together. There we coordinate, especially with Fons Catalan, the Catalan municipalities, local authorities, and País Vasco, the Basque country, the local authorities. My organizations and those two, we have office in Nicaragua, so we joined forces there, all under the umbrella of PLATFORMA. And that makes possible that we have good communication with the EU delegation. At the same time, I like to stress that over a couple of years, we still are seen as NGOs. They like to coordinate us with NGOs. Of course, we do in the field, but especially for local authorities, yeah, we have our own position. So I like to stress that. But the coordination is good. I think we are a good example that also in Europe we spread information, our views, we exchange best practices, etc. And we are in the States to coordinate further. So I like to do some suggestions. Maybe this could be a model. If I heard that the delegate or Brussels has to send program lines to the EU delegations, maybe as PLATFORMA, we can offer a matrix which member organizations are present and have knowledge, history, a network among local authorities and all involved, and intelligent information, because I think that's what we can offer to the European Commission, the delegations. That PLATFORMA make a matrix and that we present it to the European Commission, DEVCO and EEAS, and that you include it in the programs lines or especially those EU delegations, that they should have a bilateral dialogue with us, that we have a position on the table as representatives of local authorities. Just a concrete proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for the point you made at the beginning about the fact that the LRGs, local and regional governments, are very often mixed, let's say, which is a good thing because we are in favor of multi-stakeholder approach, etc. But mixed with civil society organizations, because the problem mostly is that local and regional governments and CSOs don't work under the same rules and under the same legal framework, for instance. But that's one point we make. We try to make regularly. No, so thank you very much. I think we have Anna who wanted to intervene, and then we will have Anna Lixi, sorry. And then we will have Alexandru from Calm in Moldova. And we also have a few remarks in the chat that I will read after your both interventions. Anna, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amandine. I wanted to intervene. Thank you very much for this different speakers. I heard the interesting presentations done by Gavino and by the previous ones, and this raised some other elements that I wanted to share with you in order to facilitate a little bit your work, and also reading the different intervention of Mercedes, okay. Vanessa, and the rest. So good. The point is the following. In the delegations, as I said, first point to be taken into account. The delegations, as I said before, are very, very different, and they do not have all the expertise. So it is impossible to think that there is a delegation or a general overviews in which all delegations know the difference between local authorities, civil society, because this depends very much on the capacity, not the capacity, but better, the knowledge and the competence of the people in the delegation. So this is an important element to be taken into account. Inside the delegation, for you, Association of Local Authorities, how to get involved in the programming. There is no system, there is no process defined. As Agathe expressed before, and the other colleagues also, there will be the programming guidelines saying to the delegations, please involve the local authorities. There is no process, there are no elements, steps to do this. So you have to really play a major role. And how? Contacting whom? In general, the person that you should contact is the head of cooperation. The head of cooperation is the person responsible for all development cooperation activities in a delegation. Sometimes the head of cooperation is the level of a head of unit, and the head of delegation. But as I said before, the head of delegation may be on the driving seat on the programming phase or not, depending on his interest on the development cooperations. So first of all, head of cooperation. Secondly, and I go back to what also Laurent said, with the thematic program, you add a focal point for the thematic program, meaning a person inside the delegation. I was head of governance sector. I give you an example. I was the head of the governance sector in Bangladesh, and in my team, I had one focal point for the thematic program, civil society, local authority. So whoever wanted to know something about the thematic sector could contact that person in my team. With no thematic line, there is not anymore a focal point for local authorities. So who to contact in that case? The head of cooperation, because it's the head of cooperation who can tell you who is taking over that responsibility. I finish saying another thing is attention. Attention to two things. Inside the delegation, when you have bilateral programs defined with the government on decentralization, This person, and I had a development decentralization program in Bangladesh, this person responsible for this bilateral program is different from the focal point local authorities. So attention, those that in the past have been focal points for local authorities are not necessarily your relations nowadays, because inside the same team you can have somebody else dealing with the bilateral program. The final thing is geographic programs to be defined with the government means not only that the centralized states will not necessarily be in favor of intervening on supporting local authorities, etc. But attention, there is the famous aid effectiveness principles and agenda which set that in a programming for a country, you cannot touch all and every single area. You cannot touch water and infrastructure and governance and security and migration and decentralization. In most of the cases, you will have just 2 or 3 areas of intervention. So if in a programming country, you have 2 or 3 areas of intervention and the decentralization or strengthening of local authorities is not the focal area, you have to enter into the other focal areas. If the focal area is migration or Green Deal, you have to deal with the person responsible for the focal area Green Deal, for the focal area migration, in order to get the local authorities on board in those focal areas, because otherwise you will be completely cut off.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much for this information. Marlene summarized a bit like the steps in the chat. So first, need to contact, that is really useful. Thank you very much. Contact the head of delegation and the head of cooperation, also known as head of operations in some delegations. So thank you very much, Anna, for this precision. Alexandru from the Congress of Local Authorities in Moldova.
Thank you very much, Amandine. Hello, dear all. Thank you very much to the colleagues from Commission for very good answers on very many questions before. I have still one question related mostly to the balance, or actually to the vision, to the perspective of the Commission, maybe future thinking about the balance between global, regional, and national approaches. As things are right now, frankly speaking, we do not feel at all any difference in these programs, in these approaches. It seems like comes everything all the same for all the countries. In fact, especially aid delivery modalities are not different at all. It is not clear anymore like it used to be, let's say 10 years ago. I worked for EU Delegation here in Moldova, but now it seems to be all mixed, sort of a mess, which mostly is, frankly speaking, is being decided in Brussels, according to our perception. And maybe it is very good that it is being decided in Brussels, in fact, not in delegation, because for specifics of our country, we had the last 3 years, because of political turmoils, we have mostly decisions taken in Brussels, and sometimes at the very high political level, with participation of our politicians. And this program seems to be much more efficient and much more reaching out to the population. At least they listen to the opposition, listen to the government, listen to other actors, and not just of the central government. So these are 2 points why I'm asking these questions, whether the Commission is thinking somehow to reorient or to, let's say, streamline, to improve this, let's say, decision-making at 3 levels. One, and second, based on the issues that there is not really any differences being seen on the ground between these 3 approaches at the national, regional, and global level. Regional level, we do not feel at all, frankly speaking, neither in projects or calls for proposals or in any other discussions. But this global and national, they do not somehow differ at all anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandru. Thanks for for the comment and the questions. We have Agathe Plauchut who wants to intervene. Just before, I just would like to quote Carl Wright, who in the chat, maybe you saw his comment, but he insists on the importance that EU delegations are aware that LRGs are recognized as state actors, not as CSOs, as already set out in the Article 4 of the Cotonou Agreement. And I will leave you to his the whole message in the chat. Agathe, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pick up something, I don't remember his name, but one of the speakers said that maybe a mapping of actors could be done. I find this very, very interesting. If somehow Platforma could do something like that, this could actually give us some flesh to put together with our guidelines, or aside from the guidelines, but to send to delegations to be more concrete when we say engage with local authorities. If we can say who is present, who is willing to engage, we can be more precise when telling them that they have to engage. So indeed, this would be very useful. And then some other points, because I listened very carefully to all the fears that were expressed regarding geographization, the fact that national programs indeed will be prepared with governments. Geographic programs are not only national programming, it's also the regional programming. And we don't know yet exactly the shape of the regional programming, but there are some ideas about using these programs to design actions in some sectors that are highly sensitive at national level. So, I mean, local authorities would be a major candidate for that, as well as sexual and reproductive health and rights, because some governments don't want to engage. So you see what I mean, some sectors that are very, very sensitive. And the third point I wanted to make, some speakers refer to the fact that EU delegations would lack expertise, that they would have more money to implement. Indeed, this will be a challenge, but the expertise we have in the headquarters will not be lost. It will still be there, and it can definitely, the main objective is to help EU delegations and to provide expertise to allow them to really be in a position to deliver in the sectors that are important, including this one, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Agathe. We'll be happy to communicate with you the list of the allergies associations, for instance, stuff like that. So we'll be happy to talk more about it with you. We have one question from Carla Re from the Italian National Associations in the chat. Maybe someone else would like to take the floor. So I will quote Carla. Where can we find info and members' name of EU delegations? I think some of the information are available online. Maybe someone from the EU institutions want to intervene on that? Or is there, yeah, Anna, I see Anna is ready.
Yes, I think that online you find all the delegation. I think the number, if I'm not wrong, if Peter Frisch is still there from EEAS, probably he has the exact number, but I think there are 127 delegations all over the world. As I said before, some of them are regional, so they cover many different countries. And online, in principle, you find the organigram with the name of the members of the staff working. So the name of the head of delegation and also the roles. So it should not be difficult. In case you have problems in finding these, contact us and we see what we can do. But I think that online you find everything.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I think we, Anna. Yeah, Anna. Last words from Anna. I cannot hear you. You need to unmute yourself, or I can unmute you. Anna, do you want to say something or not?
Yes.
Please do.
Just to say, when I say look online, it could be online for each and every single delegation, or in the internet website, either of EEAS or of DEVCO, in which you should find the organigram of each and every single delegation in alphabetical orders: Afghanistan, Albania, and so forth, until Zambia and Zimbabwe. So you should be able to find it in the internet of DEVCO or EEAS, is better probably.
Thank you very much. To conclude, maybe now some quick takeaways from this webinar. I think this was a really timely discussion. So thank you all for participating in it. We will keep in mind maybe the fact that the SDGs is the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 agenda is the general framework in which the action of the LRGs can fit the best. The NDICI, the new instrument negotiations, we heard that there will be, it has to ensure in a way fundings for local and regional governments, either in a thematic line, in a thematic approach, or in the geographic ones. But we also will keep in mind that the need of local and regional governments and their associations need to engage at local level, at partner country level, to engage the EU delegations directly. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you to the speakers and the participants. After 2 webinars in 2 weeks' time, we will take a small break. And PLATFORMA will be happy to come back with a 3rd edition in May, probably on the 21st of May, on the EU-Africa strategy. But let's confirm that in the coming weeks. And for that, you can follow us through our newsletters, mostly. Thank you all. Have a good day and see you soon.